Thank Jim for being here. We're doing our TV show this month.
Wait, he's going the wrong way.
Sharing all this valuable information with our Preservation Burlington fans. Yes, we have June 7th is the home store. As usual, early in June, we have 6 buildings and homes. It's on our website. It's from noon to 4 o'clock on Saturday, June 7th. That's the biggest thing coming up. This
$25 by 7 days.
$25, 7 days. Carolyn, do you want to come up here? You're better at it than me.
Yeah, well, I just had to post it. So.
Yeah, and you had a bunch of great pictures already that we put together just to highlight the homes. Yeah, so that's really what we have going on right now, and there'll be more information on this coming month's PBTV show on the 4th Thursday at Channel 17. We have Matt Yan, who's our home store committee, the chair, and he'll be telling us all about the trials and tribulations of putting the home store together and how it finally came together this year. So I think it's going to be a pretty good one. So we had 2 sold-out home stores in a row. So the bar's getting really high, but we hope everybody's going to enjoy it. Jim, thank you.
Thank you.
You're going to tell us who he is?
Jim Jones.
James R. Jim Jones, not to be confused with Kool-Aid.
Not that yet, right?
You'll find this may be a somewhat unconventional program. Probably given my years, 40 years on the radio, you tend to carry some of that over when you're doing live things as well. But history has been my thing for a long time. I did grow up in Burlington, Vermont. It wasn't until a few years ago when COVID hit that I became curious about the street railways of Burlington. I had several jobs that meant working with the public, and when the public went away for a while, I suddenly found myself with a lot of extra time, and I started thinking, well, I'm considered one of the experts of local freight railroads and passenger railroads, but I know nothing about the trolley system. So I started trying to figure out where the tracks went, and used my newspaper.com subscription to go through the beginning, and I learned about this fire. They burned a trolley. There's confusion that they burned all the trolleys. No, they burned the oldest one that could still get out of its own way. We're going to tell you more about this. This is how it ended. Let's start with how it began. Trolley wires to rubber tires, Burlington, Winooski, Essex Junction, Vermont, from 1885 to the present. This was the rail line over time. So everything kind of started in the center part of the city and went out. So we had a line that ultimately went to Queen City Park. We had a line that went up Main Street to Edmonds High School, and then down South Union Street to Shelburne Road when there wasn't much out in the south end of Burlington. Now that's where the residents were, where there were residents. But all of the industry was on Pine Street, so the commuters used that line to get to work. And there was a little tiny spur at Lakeside that went to the brick building that is still there, that once was Queen City Cotton Company. This road here, this was where Howard Park was, right across from the City Market building, over there by the railroad tracks on Flint Avenue. The line also joined up to Shelburne Road, so that you could theoretically, when things got really busy during fair time, the trains didn't have to go back and have a siding and pull out of the way for another one. They simply ran in one direction. Okay. So basically there you go in the Burlington area, and we're going to cover this more later. And then you had the lines out to Winooski, 40th and Allen, and to Essex Junction eventually. So here's the beginning when it was a horse railroad, and it started out as a rather modest little operation that just went into Winooski. It was the Burlington and Winooski Horse Railroad. Now, this is how they got around at first.
Just 2 horses.
So this will tell you about one of my favorite little poems, The Coming of the Horse Cars. This was big news in 1885. Horse cars on rails? Oh, what would our fathers and grandfathers say if they could return to our city today? Those men of strong muscle, those men of renown who conquered the forest and built up the town. As they stood on the streets, they laid out long ago where once the strong oak and pine used to grow. We think they would say as their hearts swelled with pride, "My children, stop walking. It's cheaper to ride." The thorough-braced wagon, the lumbering chase, the X-cart bobsled we used in our days. The best that we knew is completely outdone. The father is fairly eclipsed by the son. O shade of the fathers who sleep with the dead, come back to the haunts where your feet used to tread. For the place a strange sight to your visions reveals. Your children are riding in houses on wheels. Farewell to the bus of the Park and Van Ness Hotel. Farewell to the dime line and the 10-cent express. These methods of travel we faithfully tried. Now jump on the horse cars and all take a ride.
And that was,
Well, it was a guy from Medusa, New York, who actually got the wheels rolling for the Winooski and Burlington Street Railway. He worked in tandem in company with F.C. Kennedy, a businessman from Winooski, John J. Flynn, and Elias Lyman, among others. These were some of the early streetcars that were horse-operated. This is what we know as Riverside Avenue, then known as the Lower Road, and Winooski in the background. Burlington enjoyed its new street railway months before the first train finally galloped into Winooski over a 300-foot iron bridge. And this was the bridge that lasted until the flood of 1927, and then the bridge that is there now, for the time being, replaced that in the summer of 1928. So there was great rejoicing, according to the Free Press, when the trolley arrived in Winooski. And I always look at that 1867 block and think, if that building could talk. Ooh, it's just the coolest building. The North Winooski Avenue car barn received more elbow room thanks to an 1888 expansion. So they had 4 streetcars and 25 horses to begin with. As you could imagine, those horses had to be rested and stabled, and usually they were only good for about 4 hours at a time. It's a lot of work. Here we've got 2 of them trotting up Church Street. The line expanded the original route, 1885, you see in red. There were extensions to the south and just a little bit to the north. Originally, the trolley line went down Pearl Street, and then to North Champlain Street and then Washington Street to get out on to North Avenue, missing, of course, the North Street businesses that were growing and a portion of the residential section of North Street as well. So that was to be remedied in fairly short order. Equine to electric, the year was 1893. When we started receiving the electrified trolleys, there was the Hill Line, the South End Line, and the Pine Street Howard Line, as well as the Depot Line. Now, how do you get juice? Well, one place was the Gorge in Winooski Falls. Another was the flouring mill, which is just on the Burlington side of the bridge over to Winooski.
isn't there something still?
The flour mill was torn down. It was partially flooded, and they cut it out of the way. So here's a look in 1898 of the power station, the main power station at Winooski Falls. 19 feet above ground. Seems a fair, safe distance. That's how high the trolley line, the trolleys themselves, the wires work for it. Four seasons, two types of cars. You had the open cars for the summer and the nicer weather, and then you had the closed cars for the rest of the time. Open and closed cars. Everyone pictures these cute little boogers here, but this was made a lot more sense and tended to outlast the other ones as far as how long they were in service. So you've got this is, I enjoy explaining this because to most people a truck is something that runs on a highway and it carries goods. In the railroad industry, a truck is a wheel set. So you've got two wheels, that's a truck. It's a truck. Truck under a trolley. Over here you've got two trucks under a bigger trolley. Traction Company's roster sported a variety of large and small. The Hill Line, the top of Church to Pearl Street, east uphill to UVM campus, and a switchback that you will soon learn more about. Then we had the Pine Street Howard Park line back when they had a state fair at the, well, they called it Park Avenue then. That's confusing.
Yeah.
You got Park Street, you had Park Avenue. So what are you going to do? You name Park Avenue after John J. Flynn, make him happy, and there's less confusion. So here's a look at Howard Park, Queen City Cotton, which was another spot in the industrial district served by that line. Then we have the South End line. So you went from basically what was considered the unofficial headquarters, the City Hall, up Main Street as far as Edmonds High School, down South Union to Shelburne Road. See, it's missing the E. And then you keep going, and it went to the Home for Destitute Children. So this was the predecessor to the Lund Home, the Home for Friendless Women. This, the predecessor to the Barrett Institute, now Barrett Center, the Home for Destitute Children. More on that later on. Then you have the line out to North Avenue, which went out to the, basically about where the St. Joseph's is and the Lakeview Cemetery in those days before it got expanded. And the depot line, which was Main down to Lake and College. That was the original Burlington depot, across the street from this one. So Burlington Union Station, its predecessor was down here, across the street, where there's a parking lot. 40th and Allen, another spot on the rail line. Military Post Railway. So you're looking, Burlington, you get, from Burlington to Essex, you get two trolley companies in one. What a value. So you had the Burlington to Winooski line, and then what they called the Military Post, which went from halfway up Main Street in Winooski to Essex Junction. At first it stopped at 40th and Allen, and they're like, wait a minute. Wouldn't it make sense to send it just a little farther and connect with the Central Vermont Railroad here? And they said yes, so that's what they ended up doing. And this was the other end of the line in Essex Junction, one of the variations of the covered station that they had there up until 1958. It took on a number of appearances over the years. So Burlington Traction Company was formed from Military Post Street Railway and this Winooski and Burlington Railroad. This was Superintendent Thomas B. Jones, no relation. He made $28 a week as the leader of the company back in 1912. They say that he knew every tie, every stick of rail on that entire route, that he had walked it all at one time or another. 1897 brought some improvements to the street railway system, already considered the best in the state. And this is one of the rotary converter substations and a car house that they had right where the bus barn was. That was the trolley barn too. When I was a kid, I lived in the south end of Burlington, and it was like heaven to get to go visit North Winooski Avenue, because not only did they have the old bus barn, the trolley barn, they had Kassler's toy store, and across the street, if that was really good, I might get a brazier and a slinky.
What were those?
So here's part of that facility, kind of on a wedge shape, and this is where the main area was for storing cars and maintaining them. And that looks like some pretty high-tech stuff just to move people around. All those generators, all those bells and whistles and switches to get these electric trolleys across town. So there is a map of the area circa 1926. Car barn, Riverside Avenue, down that way. They used to call it First Street at one time. You have the lower road route. So you go from the bus barn down to the bridge at the Winooski River. That's one way to do it. And you had the Queen City Park extension in 1899, where they went from the Home for Destitute Children. They built it just a little farther over to the edge of the Rutland Railroad tracks. So is everyone familiar with Queen City Park Road? And you know where they have that one-way bridge? Okay. Well, this was at the east end of that one-way bridge. This was here, and there is the pedestrian walkway, and over your bridge would be right about there. So that's where the trolley line ended on the south end. And this was the Rutland Railroad passenger shelter and entrance. Postcard incorrectly listed it as the trolley station. Now, you saw the trolley station. Their trolley stations were not impressive at all. For a time, it seemed as though nothing could stop the trolleys except themselves. The cars were notorious for spinning on steep grades in icy weather and had frequent breakdowns. These drawbacks demanded a fleet of horse-drawn, covered sleds be ready to serve when ice impacted right-of-way sidelined the electrics. So they didn't get rid of all the sleds, and they didn't get rid of all the horses. They had some on standby just in case. So in 1898, Burlington Traction Company had 10 miles of track, and the gauge was 4 feet, 8.5 inches between the rail, which is American standard gauge, just like the tracks down here, but the rails were narrower, and they were T-shaped. Military Post Street Railway had similar rails, but just a little bit heavier, 56 pounds per yard, whereas the Burlington Traction were 48 pounds per yard. Better a fender bender than a pedestrian ender. Okay, what is this thing in front? It's not a snowplow, you're right. What it is basically a safety net. So the trolley guys see something coming and they can't stop in time. They ring the bell and make the noises, and they drop this. And there are stories of people who were cradled, dogs and kids and adults in one of these pedestrian. So Burlington Traction Company, this became a requirement of all of the nation's traction companies that they have fenders of one kind or another, and Burlington Traction chose the Parmenter fender of Cambridgeport, Massachusetts. Saved by the fender. Trolley car overtakes a little girl running downhill. The little 3-year-old daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Henry Facto, who reside at the top of the hill above the resident of S.H. Weston on the road to Essex Junction, had a very narrow escape from death at about 2:30 Friday afternoon, and she owes her life to the fenders with which the electric cars are equipped. The child was struck and picked up by the fender on car number 1, which leaves Essex Junction at 2:10 p.m. As it was on its way to this city and escaped most miraculously, it being impossible for the physician who was called to find a scratch upon this person.
Wow.
How many people think we would be better off if they just bring those trolleys back to work? Would you like to have rails from one end of town to the other?
Nice.
Okay. Wouldn't be any worse than potholes. Sparks fly on South Union Street. The September 1st, 1904 Weekly Free Press shared details of an elderly woman seriously injured Sunday afternoon when alighting from a trolley car on South Union Street near Adams. Mrs. H.N. White was in the company of Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Madden when the accident occurred. Sparks were thrown off from the trolley wire, and some of the passengers, becoming alarmed, alighted hastily from the car. Mr. Madden jumped off and assisted Mrs. Madden from the car to the sidewalk. While he was attending to Mrs. Madden, Mrs. White attempted to alight, and in so doing fell to the pavement and sustained severe bruises upon one elbow and upon one knee pan, besides injuring her back. A carriage was called. She was taken to her Pearl Street home for treatment. When was the last time you saw the word alight in a sentence? Or heard it spoken? Burlington Traction Company, here's a map of the system at its peak. A nickel to work, home or play. Up to 3 million annual passengers rode the trolley in a course of a year. I wrote every day because it rhymed. Basically, imagine 3 million people riding the trolley in a given year. A lot of people use it to go up to the ball field. You could use it to go to work, and just basically use it to get around. All roads led from City Hall, where the elite meet the street. So this was the original City Hall, built in 1854.
What was the population then? About less than 10,000?
We were about 14. Don't forget, we were the 3rd largest lumber port in the country at one time. Burlington had a lot of things going for it. So this is kind of a busy map. Some of these look more understandable in the format of the book. But you can recognize Church Street with the previous City Hall on your left. The tracks that go in 2 directions at the south end there. So we've got the Pine Street main line. We're going from City Hall up past Edmonds, down as we did before. We've got the Pine Street line out to Park, and then over to the Howard Park Spur. Pretty late in the game there with automobiles. So I started this during COVID, and the first thing I did before I started getting a decent collection of trolley pictures was to go to where I knew the trolley had gone and snap bus pictures. So you'll see some of those as well along the system. And there's the Van Ness Hotel at the corner of St. Paul and Main. Tracks came down in this direction, down Main Street, to the station. And they had a spot right on the side here of the Burlington Union Station. And then this is the building that we're in now, built in 1916. Just a little tiny depot line that went down from Battery Street down to Lake Street for the original, and then just right over here. And for some strange reason, they terminated at King Street, and I'm thinking it's because that's where the Lake Champlain ferry docks were and the boat docks were. When they built a new line to accommodate the new tracks when this building was built in 1916. So two, if this building could talk. Imagine all the tracks behind us. Now there's one. But it was a pretty busy spot with a lot of rail at one time, and the trolley is in red. Burlington Union Station. Take a look around. Of course, you've got false walls behind you. But look up here. That's the original newsstand sign. They had a restaurant here, and this was a happening place. The ceilings have been dropped, the walls have been added, but thank goodness that Lisa and Melinda and other caring people have saved the building and repurposed it once again, to the point where there still is a train that stops by twice a day out on the site. All these tracks are gone except for one. You wouldn't walk over the tracks, you would go over them this way as opposed to walking on the tracks. And Green Mountain Transit, as I mentioned, we'll talk a little bit about the rubber tires, but this is mostly about the trolley wires. So here we go down Pine Street on the main line. Heading down that way, that house is still there. Curtis Lumber's over here, formerly Hague, a long time ago.
Where was
Lane Press is there.
Yep, the old Lane Press was there. I mean, there was a lot of industry on that. Imagine this on Pine Street.
Really?
Yeah. And way back there is the old cotton mill. So that gives you some sense of perspective. The Baltex building. The Lakeside owes its existence to the Queen City Cotton Company, which built the neighborhood in 1894 and housed 231 of its 600 employees and their families. That means 369 workers had to come from somewhere else, and some of them took the trolley. On the Lakeside Spur, so their three-story mill commenced operations in 1895, closed during the Depression. So here's another one of those beautiful little waiting areas for the trolley company. No two were alike. You know, that's one thing. My hat's off to the bus company. You know, there's only a couple of different designs. So that spur was barely a tenth of a mile long from Pine Street. And there we are on a nice fall day. Heading down Pine Street to St. Anthony's. You can see the trolley catenary up there, 19 feet above the street. Some of the buildings in the area here that eventually became Vermont Structural Steel. And now the city market is there. You can see the trolley coming down to about where it terminated right there. So that was the Howard Park Spur. And one of the, well, there were a couple of places. Lumiere, the film company, was off Flint Avenue, then known as Park Avenue. And there was a chocolate company there. And it burned, and they quickly rebuilt it. But for 5 years, that supported a number of riders on the trolley line. Vermont State Fair, that fairground was built in 1882, so that was 3 years before the streetcar railway started. And this is how during fair time they got around. instead of running out this way and coming back and hoping that, that you don't have to pull over on one of the very rare sidings on this line. Instead, you would just run in a circus like this. So that you come down, you do your business, you come back using the other line. And this was across the street from Red Robert's store, which is what I remember it as, in the south end of Burlington. That was across the street from there. Star Corner, that's what we know as the traffic circle, as some people call it the roundabout. I can usually tell they're not natives if they call it the roundabout, or at least they're not from the south end. But I never knew it as Star Corner until I started doing the trolley research. That was new to me. Back downtown again. Construction zone now. So here you are from the Hotel Vermont, looking at a trolley coming in our direction. A little bit later on, the track stayed in the streets in many places until World War II. Now you got to pull up all the asphalt just to get rid of the rails. They waited till it was time to replace the asphalt, and they pulled up the rails, and then they used it for scrap steel. So the Strong Theater, one of the places that you could take the trolley to, and this was a spot where they did have a siding. I've got 246 slides, so if you're really dying to see some of these captions, I've got a book I'd be glad to sell you. $25 cash or local check. A $39.95 value. So here we are headed up Main Street, past the pre-graffitied Memorial Auditorium. Now a one-way street. College Street Congregational Church, where our family went for many years. Now this is one of the reasons why Edmonds has such a lengthy lawn, because you've got the trolley right down here. So there's a fairly robust lawn over here on the Main Street side as well. But this allowed the kids plenty of room to play away from the wheels of the trolley. So there's pretty generous real estate there in front of the now middle school on all sides. So when I walked to school up at Edmonds, I used to enjoy looking at all the old houses down there, on South Union Street in particular, never realizing that rails once went there as well. Now, they were required to keep the rails embedded, which frequently meant that you needed to send a track sweeper on through so that the flanged wheels could go through, but that people wouldn't be finding the rails if they were up above the level. I mean, people would be getting hurt all the time on those. Adams School. Here we are down around the traffic circle, or Star Corners, or the roundabout. Lyman Avenue. Now, I grew up on Clymer Street, which is a little dead-end street. If you go up Birch Cliff Parkway and you were to keep going across Shelburne Road, there's only about a dozen houses up there when I grew up. But there was nothing in the south end other than the Home for Friendless Women and the Home for Destitute Children, except for the neighborhood that I grew up on, where there were two farms at the end of the street, and they started building houses in the middle 20s. So I stood at the bottom of my childhood street and took that picture. So there is the Home for Destitute Children. And the map that shows you some of how they went out here. Again, it lends itself much better to a book than squinting your eyes to look at some of that. So there's the end of the line.
One of them is now where Market 32 is, right?
Close. Close.
Yeah.
Queen City Park, people would get off the trolley and walk down into the park. Now, there was always something going on during the summer, whether it was some big religious revival or some other things. I mean, people would go there and listen all day, get up in their dressed in their Sunday's best, and listen to the preacher or preachers for the day, and then they get on the trolley and go home. This was a Rutland Railroad train, which went past one of the very few pictures of their Queen City Park station. Conductor Harry Hilliard wrote on the back of a postcard, this picture was taken on the last day as we ran open cars to Queen City Park for the season. So this was a seasonal line. Once you got past the Home for Destitute Children, that part of the line after that to the Rutland Railroad tracks was seasonal only. So the traction company, they weren't making any money as a trolley company, but you had some movers and shakers who wanted to improve development in the area, like John J. Flynn, and they purchased the facility, which is still there on Otter Creek in Virgins. Nice picnic area down below there. So they purchased that, and then they ran 22 miles worth of power lines to a substation at Queen City Park. But what this meant was they had to run 3 sets of lines. So really they had 66 miles worth of lines. And of course they made their money supplying power to Virgins, the Ferrisburgs, Charlotte, Shelburne, deep south end of Burlington. So that's where the money was by then. Church Street to North Avenue. So we're going from the corner of Main and Church to Pearl. That was only a quarter of a mile. There's no shortage of pictures of trolleys in downtown Burlington, as you can see. Quite a few, and that is the original City Hall on your left.
I like that building.
A little bit later in time, shortly before that building was torn down, that was one of the newer of the trolleys. So the trolley lines were gone. By this picture, you could see nothing 19 feet above the streets other than some lamps. So I had to include this because that is my favorite car. That's a Bel Air. 1959 Bel Air. I had one when I lived out west. Did radio out there for 14 years. Lived the dream, bought the dream car, all of that stuff. Then I moved home and I put that car out for 1 year, and it just rusted right out of the I sold it to a guy in Newport, and he restored it. So here we are headed up. Thank you for allowing me that indulgence. Every now and then people send me pictures of 59 Chevys in various forms. Just love the cat's eyes. My wife has a 1958 Nash Metropolitan, just a cute little teeny-weeny car, probably a third the size of my 59. So as you can see, the church, even though it's been there forever, the steeples have changed. Its appearance has changed somewhat over the years at the top of Church Street. Somebody drew in that flag back in the days before we had digital imaging. So we're going from Church Street to North Avenue, and this is how we do it. We go on North Winooski Avenue. It's the only trolley picture I've seen on North Winooski Avenue. That's a McAllister photo. We took a lot of wonderful pictures in this area. Church Street to North Avenue line. So you're going down North Street. I don't know. I don't think I'd want to have to straddle that with my car. But how many people were thinking when they came today you'd get a nice, warm, fuzzy tribute to the trolley and how wonderful it was? I'd pay $2.19 for a gallon of gas. So here we are, going out North Avenue. They did some blasting. This is over by Burlington High School. So here we are on the edge of that, overlooking the Intervale. Over by the beach, the municipal bathing beach back then. And it ended over at the entrance to Ethan Allen Park. In fact, it was the trolley company being ordered, if you want to stay in business, you need to extend farther out North Avenue. Like, you've got to be kidding, we're losing our shirts already. That was one of many contributing factors. So 1905, they reached their peak out there on North Avenue. Right there, you can see just barely see the tracks in the dirt right there. And of course the sweeper had to come by and get all of that out of there.
What happened under snow?
They did have snow plows. Because as you know, the fender bender mender was not going to work with snow. So periodically they did have to do that. And there was a lot of manual labor shoveling snow in those days too, not just the plows that they had to send out. An honest to goodness Burlington traction token. Thank you, Roger Brassard. Then we have the Hill Line. Got to serve UVM, got to serve the hospital, Sire Allen School, how about Centennial Field? So it was 1.6 miles from Pearl Street to where it went on Pearl Street to the Winooski River Bridge. All those residents along the way that are still around that saw the trolleys go clanging by. The Gojerian Hospital, built in 1925, so it only saw trolleys for 4 years. You can see the rails in the bottom there, right over by the Burlington, Vermont. That's the reason I bought this postcard. Hey, there's rails in there. So here was one of the spots at UVM where see the little stairs here? You would get off on the trolley right here and walk down or walk up into the trolley or down off the trolley. Right over by Mansfield House. And there is the spur. Mary Fletcher Hospital, Ira Allen School. Looks a lot like the one out on North Avenue, doesn't it? But it was bigger. Same designer though.
Too bad they don't.
Yeah, it is. And thankfully, the original part of the hospital is still there. What a cool building. Now, this is very uncharacteristic of Burlington Traction Company. I mean, look at that. Nicely designed, attractive. I assure you there are no others that look like that. So here we are on Colchester Avenue over near Centennial Field. Picture Colchester Avenue going down into Winooski. That's one heck of a hill, isn't it? What would happen if you were riding in the trolley and the brakes failed?
You'd be in over.
I think some people call it one of those come to Jesus moments. So there's Centennial Field. Green Mountain Cemetery. Ah, there's the hill. Look at that. How do we get around that? You build a switchback. So you go down Colchester Avenue as far as Chase, and you turn onto Chase and you slow down. You get over to Barrett Street and you take a sharp turn left, and you come out by that building that's now got all those beautiful sunflowers some time of the year. I think there's a Domino's Pizza over there too, and that's where you come out. At the bridge. Hairpin curve. And there's one picture of it on Barrett Street. This was taken during the after the flood of 27, because this goes down to a walkway and the temporary bridge that they had across, but we're getting to that. So you have the hill line and you have the lower road. So here you are looking at a very familiar building. Oh, slow shutter speeds. There's a trolley behind that guy. This was the flour mill that somebody asked about. And they did take that down in 27 after the flood. Pillsbury's best. And at one time, they used some of the energy from that to power the trolley.
So is that Colchester Avenue on the left of that Pillsbury?
I'm sorry?
Was that Colchester Avenue on the left of going backward?
Colchester Avenue was straight up.
Yeah.
Barrett was on the left, and Lower Road was on your right. And now you're looking at Lower Road. So where you were was over here. And it became later on Riverside Avenue. I gave a show once and somebody said, that's not Lower Road. I said, it was Lower Road. So there we are taking Lower Road, passing out the original athletic park over by the Intervale over to the car barns. And there's one trolley picture. One of the summer ones. You can see the catenary 19 feet above the road. It's a little snowy there. They could probably run the plow, maybe. 1907. So now you're in Burlington again, over by the little wedge-shaped area where they had the trolley barn. And more recently, thank goodness, they saved that in 2000 and repurposed it once again.
Yes, they tore the other one down.
So there's a trolley crossing the bridge, the 300-foot bridge, Burlington to Winooski. This bridge, which was finished in 1928, saw trolleys for less than a year. They actually put the trolleys in, and before long took them out. So we're on Main Street in Winooski. One of the larger ones, probably the largest one. Meet over at the 1867 block, another place where the trolleys did have a siding. And this is roughly where the Winooski and Burlington original horse railway met with the military post line to Essex Junction.
You gotta tell that story about how they connected up, ran over the Center Vermont Railway on a weekend.
Yep.
Mr. Flynn.
All right, somebody's been paying attention. Somebody saw us on Channel 17.
So tell us a story.
Okay, so first of all, we're going to get to the Winooski Depot extension, because they did build a quick little extension to the Winooski station in 1922. Too little, too late, and all it was a tenth of a mile long. All right, look back this way. That is the Main Street overpass. Well, trolleys went on that Main Street overpass. But did the Central Vermont want them to? No, because when the Central Vermont Railway blasted through Winooski in that rock area, that's a rock cut, they were responsible for paying for a public bridge over the right-of-way that they created. So when the trolley wanted to come there and use the bridge, the Central Vermont Railway said, no way, Jose. So what they did was they posted a couple of, Central Vermont Railway posted a couple of guards there. And they spent time, when they were building this line, and it was a Sunday when you couldn't go to court, and the trolley people sent a bunch of laborers over who completely outnumbered the guards and tied them up and put them out of commission, put the tracks down. There was nothing anybody could do. It was Sunday. And on Monday, they took their just desserts, which really wasn't too bad. They had to put down heavier planking so that the heavier trolleys, which would be heavier than the carriages at the time, would make the bridge more stronger. And they would have to pay $10 a year maintenance fees. I think they could handle that.
What year?
That was in 1895. So here we are on the Military Post Railway as we do the second, well, it's not even the second half, it's the last third of the total mileage. 1867 block on your right. And there's the Central Vermont Railway, now New England Central, big dig underneath. The bridge over the top that the trolleys, they didn't go on that bridge, but they went on its predecessor, up Main Street. There's a view of it looking down Main Street. And they turned onto East Spring Street, which basically meant they were going to go downhill again to Hood's Crossing. They went past the high school, which would have been on your left, down East Spring Street. Porter Manufacturing Company, a major business area. At one time, they were the largest wooden screen manufacturing company in the world, and in Winooski, Vermont. And I'm finishing up a book on the Central Vermont Railway's line from Essex to Burlington right now. And in 1952, by then they could no longer compete with aluminum doors and screens. That's what finished them off. And it really cut into the railroad because 2 years later the woolen mill went out. So Winooski was hard pressed in a short amount of time. So this is the Porter Manufacturing Company, which took people to and from work. Hood's Crossing, dangerous crossing. So you still have this track. The trolley went up the hill that way. Hood's house on the left, out of view. Several times they've shaved this down so that the visibility is better for cars and trains since then. And the chip train goes down through there about 5 times a week. I know some people in Winooski think it goes by every hour, but it doesn't. So there you are with the current version of what was there, what is there. Heading past St. Michael's, off on the side. It was on the side of the road there, future Route 15. When I was doing this original book, suddenly I went there one day and Founders Hall was gone. I guess I wasn't reading the paper. Dunbar's, this is what we know as the Fanny Allen Hospital. It was known as Dunbar's Station. Anybody who spent any time at Fanny Allen, hopefully not too much unless you work there, they have the Dunbar's restaurant named for that. So there they are at Dunbar's. Got the 40th and Allen up here. Trolley tracks on the right. 2 batteries of artillery, 12 cavalry troops on the left. And of course there are stories of military men who got on the trolley, went into Winooski for some action, had more than a little to drink, and came back on the trolley and basically ambushed the trolley motorman and took the trolley for an additional ride before they returned it to the fort. So you can see where the track was in relation to present-day Route 15. So, lot here. There's the Central Vermont Railway that still exists as New England Central. Trolley line there, Route 15 there, and of course the fort. They had a shared depot, trolley line and the Central Vermont Railway. A modest little thing. Here's a look at it today with the 85-foot tower in the background. Another thing that I wish could talk. It was only for a few years that the Champlain Valley Exposition grounds were trolley turf because they'd had it up in the muddy Essex Center area behind the Grange for years, but in 1922 they moved to here. So for 7 years you had trolleys that served the Champlain Valley Exposition. Summit was one of those places, Summit Street now, on Pearl Street as you're at Essex Junction. That was the peak right there of the Essex part of the line. And they say that because of electrical load problems, let's say you're climbing Colchester Hill, Colchester Avenue Hill, and another trolley's on the line climbing Summit. At the same time, there could be a drop in the load and both would slow down because they were taxing the electrical system. Pearl Street in Essex, before it was known as Five Corners. Main Street, Railroad Avenue. First 2 years Military Post Railway came into existence. The Central Vermont Railway was not going to let them use their station. So basically they had to stop the train right here, switch the pole over in the other direction and let people off, and they had to walk to the station. But 2 years later they made an agreement, and that bus service still goes to the station, the newer version of the station. Brownell Block, still there. It was fun getting the bus pictures while looking at the bus schedule and thinking this was similar to the trolley schedule, which went every half hour on the Essex line, every 15 minutes during prime peak hours in parts of Burlington. And then later filling in with some of these historic photos as they became available.
Do you want any of these trolleys preserved and taken into Shelburne Museum or anything like that?
It was too early. Some of them were saved for a while. They became tool houses. One was a gas station over by the traffic circle. There was one that became a diner in Winooski. And fortunately, the bell was saved. And that's at the Winooski Historical Society. So if you're ever in there and dying to find out how those things sounded, just go in there and ask Joe Perrin if he could ring his bell. He'll be glad to do it for you. I love this picture because we've got steam, the last version of the train station when it was at the wood overhang, and a bus with the cream and green color. The cars were too early for me. This was about 1953. Okay. And current, more or less, view of it. A nickel no more. It's World War I. The war ends, people are coming home, prices are going up. What to do? 5 cents for a trolley ride. So they did the unthinkable. They raised the price to 7 cents. It was a big deal at the time because the wages of the employees had to go up. So you got these guys working 10.5-hour days, no vacation, no holidays. Remember, these were the good old days. $18 for first-year employees a week. After your 5th year, you were up to 21. You had to buy your own uniforms, no paid vacation.
Do they make change?
And you wonder why I got into broadcasting.
Do they make change on the trolleys? And,
Didn't have to.
like if you had a dime or something, they would change back? No?
No. And a lot of people use these tokens.
Oh.
Well, Burlington Traction Company abandoned the Union Station line. Autos and taxis were sighted in 1925. This was the first trolley line to go. A gentleman named Bill William Sampson Appleyard moves to Burlington. He's an entrepreneur, wants to sell some of those shiny new Chrysler automobiles to Burlingtonians. Terrific. He's got an auto dealership. Chrysler told him, by the way, you're also going to have to sell Graham buses, which we also have available. And he said, okay, I'll ask around. And he checked with the people at the trolley, and they're like, no way, are you kidding me? We got trolleys, we don't need buses. So the Graham people said, well, you do have that quota to meet. So he took 1 or 2 of the buses and started running them in places where the trolleys did not go. Primarily the hill section around Summit Street, UVM area, Willard Street, and would take people into downtown and around. And people love these comfortable, free, by the way, buses at that point. And kind of got used to it in a hurry and started saying, look what they're doing in that little part of town where this man is giving free bus rides. Flynn and his associates, meanwhile, decide we're getting out of this, we're going to sell the traction company. Good luck. Fauché Company bought it in July of 1926, not because of the trolley, but because of the Virgin's power facility. They saw money there. Meanwhile, Appleyard is finding that these buses are kind of cool. So he started Vermont Transit Company, so he could operate. You can't operate in Burlington, operate everywhere but Burlington. And he did. Along comes the flood of 27. Trolleys are just barely hanging on. Appleyard's running buses over the Limekiln Bridge, which is the only way that you could get over to Essex Junction in this area because the Burlington-Winooski Bridge was too low and washed out. So they had the temporary pontoon structure, but no trolleys. And the bridge would have been over here that was torn out. And this is right here on the Burlington-Winooski line. You got the river. Look how high it is. Lower Road, Hill Road come together to nothing. It's empty. (1928), the bridge that we know and love and is about to be terminated, I think, in the next couple of years, was built. Monday, August 6, 1928. It arrived, but the trolleys were still a ways off. They had the ribbon cutting ceremony, big celebration, and everybody got to drive their cars on the wonderful new Winooski Bridge. This is a rare photograph. Did I do jumping jacks when this picture came into my collection? Yes, I did, because it was such a rare time that this even happened. So you can see it coming down Main Street and over to Barrett. And this was the last of the Burlington trolleys, August of 1929. Now, before the trolley railroad was done, they were told you have to do something about serving the people of North Beach. Well, they couldn't lay tracks there, so they're like, okay, I guess we'll have to buy a bus. Where do you think they went to get their bus?
Minneapolis.
I was going to say, did they go to Mr. Appleyard? No, no, no. No Grahams for them. They bought a Studebaker. And that was the only bus they ever owned. So Appleyard, he ended up buying the trolley system. And when he purchased the trolley, he told people, okay, we'll have some consultants come in and weigh the situation. Of course, we already knew what he was going to do. And he ended up telling people on the day that it was announced that the trolley company was going to go bye-bye, that there wasn't going to be a single day when somebody had to get off a bus and go onto a trolley. It's true. All buses are nothing. So, not only was Mr. Appleyard promotional savvy and an entrepreneur, but he knew who to talk to. The high school drama coach at Burlington High. Let's come up with something people will never forget. A huge spectacle. In fact, it was such a huge spectacle.
Could you try again? Oh, I'm sorry.
It was such a big thing that even Path Films came to film it. And what they did was they brought everybody to downtown Burlington on a trolley. Free rides all day, down to Burlington. We're going to leave you at City Hall Park. And then down Church Street from the distance, people could hear a band playing funeral dirge music. And one trolley, the oldest one that could still get out of its own way, was dressed in crepe paper. Wow. They come around the corner, down Main Street, stop in front of Hotel Vermont. They have two of the senior employees of the trolley company, one who went all the way back to the horse-drawn era. And they were told that here's a jug of kerosene, throw it inside the car. Everybody back up! And then they put the match to it. And one trolley car, the smell of kerosene, vacuum cleaners. It was the end of the trolley era. Here's one of the repurposed trolleys over there by the traffic circle in Burlington. Everyone went home in shiny new buses that day. So they were all waiting right down here. Some of the shiny buses, that one's a battery park.
Lubricate themselves.
Imagine that, a self-lubricating bus. So they ended up turning the trolley barn into a bus barn. Sound of an unhappy custodian. Burlington Rapid Transit had a lot of peaks and valleys. 1929 to 1973, Bill Appleyard sold Burlington Rapid Transit, the bus company, and Vermont Transit to his stepson. From 1972, you're looking at Burlington Rapid Transit bus, one of the newer ones on your left. There had been a 75% drop in passenger counts between 1947 and 1972, and it only got worse. When I was in high school, these buses were still around, but they weren't painted so attractively, and these were called the Special, and the pot smokers were in the back, and we could smell it in the front, but these buses by then were not being seen by anything other than like school bus service and stuff. This became the spot here, Valade's Terminal, the bus terminal, right over here across from the Hotel Vermont. Close-up view, nice signage there, Central Terminal Company. They really dressed that up in the Art Deco. CCTA came along later on, reorganized in 1973. The area got a lot bigger: Burlington, South Burlington, Essex, Winooski, Shelburne, Williston, Richmond, and some outlying communities beyond that. Became Green Mountain Transit in the year 2016. This isn't really on the bus route, but I had heard that around 7:20 they'll be running a bus by every morning to go somewhere, so great. So I was able to get a bus picture going past there. All this and more can be experienced in Trolley Wires to Rubber Tires. And there's a look at basically the map of the system, with the exception of North Avenue, which would have been in the far upper left. That's all, folks. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Wow, you've had a lot.
And 5 years ago, I didn't know a thing about trolley. Any questions, concerns?
What are you doing this?
Right now, I'm working on Central Vermont Railway's Burlington branch, so I'm almost done laying out that book. That'll cover the tracks of the railroad that fought the trolley company over there at Main Street. So that'll probably be out in the summertime. So I do have some books for sale. Don't forget Preservation Burlington over there. Fine group of folks. I much appreciated that they had me come and do this today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.